what is going on? Let me turn my phone on airplane mode so it doesn't distract from the video. So, Redgard, this product behind me. I've done quite a few videos lately of Isaac Ostrom, aka Tile Coach, messing up Redgard, talking smack about Redgard, talking about how you need a mil thickness of, like 20 mils, 25 mils, and all this stuff for it to be effective because he reads directions. This guy that I'm going to show reads directions also, which is a bit cringe because anytime you do a job, and I don't care what field you're in, it doesn't matter if it's welding or plumbing or, in this industry, tile or whatever, and you're using products, you're responsible ultimately for your products. You are, not the manufacturer. Redgard is not going to come to your rescue. Aqua Defense, Hydroban, all of those are not going to come to your rescue. Neither is Curdy. If you put Curdy on your walls and you mess up somehow, even if you follow the directions, Schluter is not going to come to your rescue. I have a video. Should I put it up here? Yeah, I'm going to put it up here. Sorry. So the video is going to be right there about how this guy had a linear drain that he called in Schluter, and the Schluter rep basically gave him a hard time. And I spoke to him, and as of yet, they have not come to any conclusion on whether it was their fault or it was his fault. I would say that it was his fault because with those linear drains, with that cloth that you have surrounded on those drains, there should be an overlap of a Redgard or some type of product, an overlap. When I use linear drains and any fleece material that comes with the drain, I always overlap with Redgard, Aqua Defense, Hydroban, Ardex. It doesn't really matter, but you have to overlap. That Curdy allows for not overlapping anything on their product is amazing. That Schluter hasn't even come up with their own liquid topical membrane so that now they can make sure, where their instructions say, yeah, overlap this fabric and then overlap it with our product. They could make a boatload of money if they came up with their own liquid topical membrane. But then that would negate the whole idea that Schluter has of all their products using thin set for glue that's waterproof, even though thin set's not waterproof. It's weird. Anyway, getting to the discussion at hand, as I prefaced the video with, I posted a lot of videos lately last month of Isaac messing up on his experiments and talking smack about Redgard when he goes to Homeowner, and the Homeowner messed up their own product. Well, the product that they used happened to be Redgard. One of the things that I saw in the comment section of all those videos that Isaac had done is not using a primer. So it would be one part of Redgard, no matter what that portion happens to be, one part of Redgard, 4 parts of water. You mix them together, and then you have either a sprayer, a pump sprayer, or a brush or a roller or whatever, and you put that product on, that Redgard product that's diluted onto a porous surface first. That way you have adhesion. You have ensured that you have primed it, that it's soaked in well enough to where the second, third, and fourth, and eighth, and 10th, and 12th layer go on appropriately. Having said that, it doesn't require that many. It does not require that many. 2 to 3 coats is good enough. It works. The directions and the PDF and all that stuff doesn't matter to me. That you put on 7 coats or 17 coats doesn't make it any better. It makes it more expensive, but it doesn't make it any better. And I have proof. I look on my channel. In fact, just put Redgard experiment into the search box in YouTube, and you're going to find all my experiments. Cardboard box, sheetrock, frozen sheetrock, frozen. Like, I did everything I could to make Redgard fail, and I can't. Isaac did many, many times. But again, I digress. What this guy talks about is doing a primer coat first. And in the comment section with Isaac's videos and mine that I push back on his, the culprit seems to be the application, that there's no primer on a porous surface. Typically, I use green board. I use, like hardy backer and it doesn't really matter what the backer is. It matters what you're putting on the backer. because at the end of the day, your tile is now onto that waterproofer and not what's behind it. And so I have no compunction about, you know, just applying straight Redgard onto any of the products that I use, because I've shown it on videos and it works. That you have a porous surface, unlike sheetrock or some type of paper-faced product, that you have a porous surface would then denote that, yes, a primer is probably a better idea than not using it. And I think that's where Isaac screwed up on his homemade experiments that he did in his shop, that he didn't use a primer. And also he didn't wait the, 3-day cure time and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of mistakes that he makes. And it's amazing to me that he makes so many mistakes, and then everybody wants to go watch his videos and sign up to his mentality when it's diametrically opposed to common sense. Doesn't make any sense. Look on his videos. You're going to say, "Oh, you're the man. Oh, you know what you're doing. You're doing it right," and blah blah blah. And it just, it just throws common sense out the door. Just throw it out the door. It doesn't matter. Common sense is irrelevant. Follow the instructions. Be a book soldier, and you won't have a problem. But then he shows a problem of being the book soldier. Like, he literally shows what happens if you follow the instructions. I digress. Again, let me show this guy. Let me bring him up, and I'm going to interrupt, as I always do in the interim, and, kind of chime in. This is a homeowner, by the way, so he's not a professional at all. He mentions that. And he succeeded in his application, but there's a lot of hiccups. I'm going to call them hiccups. There's a lot of things that he did wrong, as far as I'm concerned, that he did wrong. And I'm going to enumerate those things as I bring him up and show his stuff.
We recently waterproofed our shower using Redgard, and I want to share our experience as well as 2 major pitfalls that are reasons that some people do not have success with Redgard. Redgard is one of the most popular waterproofing membranes out there. You can find it at your local hardware store. It comes in both the liquid applied version, which is what we're going to talk about today, as well as a fabric version. So Redgard can be used as a waterproofing membrane. It can be used for shower pans. It can be used as a crack isolation membrane. This can even be used for pools or steam rooms as well. So it's a very versatile product. When you're working with Redgard, definitely follow the instructions. This is not just like painting over a drywall. This has very special application procedures.
And that's where I disagree. This is not just painting over drywall. Absolutely 100,000% it is just like painting over drywall with a roller, literally like you're painting over drywall. In fact, that's what I do. A couple of coats with a roller and then a brush in all of the critical areas. When I say critical, the change of planes aren't as critical as everybody makes them out to be, but I'm going to have something to say about that too. Watch what happens.
So first of all, you want to make sure that your substrate is proper for this material. So it can stick to a lot of things. It can stick to drywall, it can stick to cement board, it can even stick to certain types of plywood, but definitely confirm that your substrate will adhere to Redgard.
Everything that Redgard gets onto adheres. It's all over my shirt, it's all over my work pants, and it doesn't come up. So yeah.
For a list of all the suitable substrates for Redgard, I've attached the technical data sheet in the description below. For highly absorptive materials such as cement board or concrete, you're going to want to pre-prime your surface. So you can do that by simply mixing 4 parts water and 1 part Redgard, and that'll get you a very dilute mixture, and then you can go ahead and either paint or spray that on. So all that's doing is permeating into the substrate to allow the actual Redgard to adhere better.
Okay, I'm going to talk a couple of things about this right here. This picture right here, and I'm going to let it stay for a while so you can see it. A couple of things, and I'm going to move on to that as we get deeper into the video. Where all those fasteners are, those screws or nails or whatever, it doesn't matter what the fasteners are. They're in his video, they're not recessed, and I don't like that. I recess all of my fasteners, and then I go over them with a little bit of thin set. Same as I was if I were doing sheetrock and sheetrock mud. You go over your fasteners, and that he's not going over his fasteners, that he's not even recessing his fasteners so that he can go over it with something, really drives me crazy. I'm going to say bat. It drives me crazy, folks. Like, why would you not recess your fasteners and then overlap them with something. Like, it just is natural to me from the very first time I ever started doing tile work, and 25 years ago, that I always recess my fasteners no matter what the backer board. Now, getting to the backer board, this is Durarock. This is clearly Durarock. And what I like about what he did, which he didn't mention, is that he turned his Durarock around onto the backside, right? So the backside is showing. The backside is smoother than the front side. The front side is kind of cratery. It's cratery, the front side, because when you use backer board, and this is not even talking about Redgard or any waterproofers, back in the day before there were waterproofers, that crater area would adhere, would take in your thin set, and then you would put your tile with back butter and all that stuff, and yeah, it would be a monolithic adhesion of your thin set. And that crater side is much more difficult to waterproof with any liquid topical membrane than it would the backside. The backside is smoother. And because we're not depending on that crater surface anymore, because we're putting a waterproofer on, it doesn't matter now that you turn that around where the crater side is on the back, it's on the studs. And now you have a smooth side to put your Redgard on. And that's what he did. And he didn't mention it, but he should have, because a lot of people, if you ever tried to apply any liquid topical membrane onto the crater side of Durarock, good luck on that. You're going to use a roller 4, 5, 6 times to get into all those craters. So it's much more difficult. So just a heads up on that. I thought I'd mention it because it needs to be mentioned.
Failing to prime your surface is probably the #1 pitfall. A lot of even professional tilers don't do this, and then if you forget to prime it, then your Redgard, when you apply it at 100% concentration, may not stick, and it may delaminate from the surface. You may get pinholes and cracks, and you're just chasing all kinds of issues that could have been easily avoided.
Okay, so there's never been any issues that I've experienced by 100% Redgard without the primer. There's never been an issue. Now, could you have pinholes and could you have some of those things he's talking about? Like, every operator has a malfunction level, like everybody has a different level on application of anything. So could that happen without the primer? Yes, but I've never seen a failure of Redgard specifically because I didn't use a primer. Specifically, there's never been a failure of Redgard. Had they used a primer, it wouldn't have failed, except for Isaac's videos. Had Isaac used a primer on his experiments, then arguably his failure wouldn't have been as profound. I don't know. I don't know. So what he's saying is kind of true and not true. Let me also point out the fact that he has a rebreather mask. So this is funny too, because I mentioned that on a video that I did about Redgard with Steve, that he was complaining, "Ooh, man, this stuff is toxic. We need a fan in here." Yet there was a fan right above him and he wasn't wearing a mask. And it's like, wear a mask, folks. Like, as soon as you open the pail, you notice the fumes, and it's like, well, duh, let me put a mask on. So I'm just mentioning that because it needs mentioning. When people first use Redgard, they're going to notice, just like I did. When I first started using it, I didn't use a mask. And the first 2 or 3 times I used it, I was dizzy. I had to step out of the room. It's pretty toxic.
We chose to apply the Redgard using a disposable paintbrush. It can also be applied using a roller or a spray gun or a trowel. When applying it, it's important to make sure that you get a very complete cohesive coverage. You want it to be thicker than you would apply paint, but you don't want it to be gobbed on there and super, super thick. Otherwise, as it dries, it will shrink, and that will lead to cracks and pinholes. So,
absolutely, 100%. Couple of things there too. Let me back up just a wee bit. Hold on a second, see if I can get this to back up just enough. That fact that he's using a brush, this kind of drives me a little batch crazy. Why are you using a brush, and especially a small one? Like, if you're going to use a brush, use a girthy, like 5-6 inch brush, right? If you're going to use a brush on the walls. But then again, I don't even see the purpose of using a brush on the walls. Like, there's no good reason to be doing that. He could have used a roller, especially since he's got the backside of that Durarock showing. The roller would have gotten into all of that stuff. And 2 to maybe 3 coats. I've never had to use 3 coats on a wall. Walls don't fail anyway, and my walls are waterproof 100%. that he's using a brush is a little bit silly.
Super thick. Otherwise, as it dries, it will shrink and that will lead to cracks and pinholes. So to achieve the final thickness, you can just apply additional coats after the original coat has dried. Each coat that you apply should be perpendicular to the previous coat to make sure that any brush lines or anything don't line up and leave you with divots. One of the marketing claims for Redgard is that it does not require any sort of support for gaps up to 1/8 of an inch. That's that.
I disagree. And that's the second, when I mentioned the fasteners aren't countersunk and all that stuff, this is a second disagreement this is a second critique that I have with him. Because if you notice, and we're going to get to that a little in shortly, where you see the niche, everywhere his wallboard comes together, there's a gap. And all of those gaps get filled. Same as those fasteners, those gaps get filled. Every single one gets filled with thin set. I have a monolithic surface before I apply my Redgard.
Crack isolation membrane feature it has. So for any flat surfaces that have small gaps, you could theoretically leave those without any support.
Okay, so look at the niche now. You see that the wallboard that he did on the inside of the niche on the top? Well, it's all four sides around, and including the corners, left and right corner. Everywhere he has wallboard, he's leaving those gaps. Now, arguably, could those be filled with with Redgard? Yes. You know, you could slather on that with a brush. And look at that tiny brush he's using too. You could slather Redgard into those cracks and you'll be good as gold. No worries whatsoever. That he leaves those gaps is only because he knows that he's going to be using the mesh membrane at the end. And so, yeah, kind of sort of doesn't matter. With the mesh membrane, cloth membrane, if you will, he's going to put that in there and then overlap that with Redgard. But I feel better about filling those gaps with thin set first. That's just me.
The second pitfall is not using the appropriate reinforcement for any of those edges or seams.
Okay, pitfall. When he talks about pitfall, and let me bring my ugly mug back up first. When he talks about pitfall on this, hold on. What pitfall? That you're not using tape on all of those seams will be the other pitfall of using Redgard. I think I've used tape twice, maybe 3 times ever with my Redgard, and only because my customer requested it, because I couldn't get into my customer's brain the common sense thing. Redgard is a crack preventer. See if I can move out of the way. It's a crack preventer first. Waterproofer and crack preventer. See right there? See right there? It's a crack preventer. When you put Redgard between any surface like that, it stretches and it stretches and it stretches far more than tape ever would. Far more than tape ever would. So that you're using Redgard into those cracks and a tape is redundant. It's like totally unnecessary. But also there has to be a failure for me to come up with a solution, right? If there was a failure, if I ever came on a job, it's like, man, if they'd only used tape on this thing, it wouldn't have failed. Then I would be on board with that. But because it doesn't fail by not using the tape, I don't use the tape. So kind of disregard, or you can climb on board with this whole idea that tape is going to make somehow it's going to make it better.
I still chose to use a 6-inch alkali resistant mesh on all of those.
And I disagree with the idea of alkali resistant. You're going to hear about that with mesh tape, including this cloth membrane that he's using. Alkali resistant all the time. You're going to hear that on videos that are 5 years old, 10 years old, whatever. Alkali resistant. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. What does that mean exactly? What if you use a tape that wasn't alkali resistant? What would happen? What's the end result? One of the issues that I have about a lot of YouTubers, especially in this lane that I'm in, is that they always talk about a failure. You know, if you don't do this, it's possible you'll have a failure in a year. It might be not a year, it might be 2 years from now, or it might be 5 years, but you're going to have a failure. Yet they always fail to show the failure. And I pride myself on the fact that everything I talk about, every single thing I talk about on my channel, I back it up with a video. I have a video library of over 800 videos. And Of those 800 videos, there's backup to everything I say. Unfortunately, not all YouTubers have that mentality. They're just going to say, well, you could have a failure in sometime in the future, but they never show what that failure is.
Joints. And then anytime you have a change of plane, it's highly recommended that you use a mesh as well. So that mesh will be applied immediately after you do your very first coat while it's still wet. And we use the trowel to press it in and get it a nice smooth surface. And then subsequent coats, we could just paint over that mesh tape. There's another wire mesh type of material that is sometimes...
He misspoke, wire mesh. It's not wire mesh. It's fiberglass mesh. And so this is a tape. This is the alkali resistant tape that everybody always talks about. Tape is a crack preventer on sheetrock. If you don't use one of these type of mesh tape, or you don't use paper tape on sheetrock, then the movement between the seams will cause the mud to crack. And the mud is very, very thin anyway. We don't have that kind of movement in a shower. The movement that we would have in a shower, especially with a Redgard, well, any liquid topical membrane or even Curdy, would mitigate the whole idea of a separation. So therefore, the tape is absolutely 100% unneeded. Unneeded, totally. And I digress when I said he had a small brush. That's about the size that I use. I think that's a 5-inch brush, but okay.
Used in either drywall repairs or cement board projects. We do not want to use that in Redgard. The mesh is not fine enough to really adhere well to the Redgard, as well as the fact that it's usually not coming in that 6-inch width. So the fabric is going to be more flexible and much more forgiving with.
Okay, so the fabric is going to be more flexible. Yes, it is. And more forgiving. Yes, it is. Blah, blah, blah. The fabric mesh that he's using around that niche kind of negates the whole idea that he didn't fill in the cracks. But why would you not fill in the cracks? Like, even if you know that you're going to use tape, still fill in the cracks. Like, there's no harm, no foul, and it makes a more monolithic surface, you know, to me, in my thinking.
Redgard. We have a link below to the proper material. The thickness required according to the ANSI code is a little bit more stringent for the shower pan itself than it is for the waterproofing of the walls. So they kind of give you a shorthand on the TDS that you need about 1 gallon per 40 square feet for the shower pan itself, whereas 1 gallon can cover about 55 square feet for the walls.
Okay, so let me speak about that for a minute, and let me bring my mug back up here if I can read it. No, I can't read it. I'm going to have to show it full. Can I do full screen with him? I don't know if I can or not. No, I can't. So let me bring this back up. 1 gallon for 55 square feet on the walls is what he's talking about. ANSI, you know, allows for 1 gallon for 55 square feet. So typically the walls of a shower, say a tub to shower conversion, you have, you know, 3 times 7, 3 times 8, 3 times 8, 16, 16 and 16, 32. And then you have your back wall, which is 5 times 8, 40, you know, blah, blah, blah. So you have roughly about 75 to 80 square feet on your walls. If a tub to shower conversion, right? Roughly about 50 square feet, let's just say. Let's push it out to 65 or 70. And then on the pan surface yourself, it's just shy of 3 foot. It's usually about 32 inches by 5 foot. So 3 by 5, you got another 15 square foot. 1 gallon does me a whole shower like that. A whole shower, 1 gallon. So I don't know where the standards came up that ANSI decides, you know, that they have the answers rather than real life experience. Like, I'm in the field, I'm doing this stuff on a daily. I've been using Redgard for probably shortly after it came out. So I don't know how long that is, 12 years, 13 years, something like that. And I don't have failures. So I don't know how it is that 1 gallon is going to do 55 square, what is it? 1 gallon for 55? 55 square feet on a wall, and 1 gallon for 40 square foot of a floor. 40 square foot of a floor. So what I said earlier, let's, for even numbers, 3 times 5, that's 15 square feet. You're going to use half a gallon for your shower floor? Half a gallon, really? Okay.
For the way we were applying it, we managed to do about 3 to 4 coats on the floor to achieve the proper thickness versus about 2 coats on the walls. When applying the Redgard.
Okay, versus 2 coats on the wall. So again, 2 coats on the walls is more than enough. In fact, 2 coats on the floor is more than enough too. I usually do 3 coats, or I'll just bottom out the gallon of Redgard or whatever. If I have to do 3, it's only because I have a little extra left. But yeah, 2 coats on the wall, and he's brushing it on again, totally unnecessary. If you're going to use Redgard, please save yourself a bunch of labor and use a roller. Walls don't fail anyway. Like, walls don't fail. Your niche is not going to fail. So use a roller on the entirety of the wall, and then go in like he is doing in the corners with a brush.
It initially shows up as sort of a pinkish color, and then when it dries about an hour and a half later or so, it'll turn red. So once it's dried and maybe let it sit for a little bit, then you can go ahead and apply later coats. After applying each coat, do a visual check to see if you see any pinholes or cracks, and then be sure to fill those in with subsequent coats. When doing the flood testing,
I like subsequent.
You want to make sure that it's had time to fully cure. We usually let it sit overnight before doing that flood testing, and if you're interested on how to do that, you can check our link on the screen below. After you've completed your flood test, let the shower dry out, and then it is ready for tiling.
All right, so let me come back on here. Hold on a minute, because I think this is basically the end of the video. I don't know why there's still minutes left on it, the way I can see it. So I'm going to say, you know, when he talked about following instructions in the very beginning of the video, he didn't go over the instructions. And the way I see that he's using the brush and brushing it on and all that stuff, I don't know if he's adhering to the manufacturer's recommendations of whatever it is, 15, 20 mil, 25 mil, whatever. I have another video coming up next week where Homeowner actually did that, and they have like a wet gauge where they can actually gauge out the 20 mils and all that stuff, where, you know, 7 coats will only be 10 mils. You're going to put a lot of coats on here to reach that magic number that Redgard talks about, which I don't even care about because the instructions are irrelevant to me. I'm responsible for my own work. This guy never even talks about this guy never even talks about the mill thickness and all that stuff. So he just slathers it on. It's a very quick video. I think it's only 12 minutes long. I made it seem longer because I always do. There's so much misinformation based on the directions. And I am not going to ever do a video. There were a bunch of comments in my latest videos, you know, Bob, why don't you do a test based on the instructions? I'm like, why would I? Like, why would I stoop to a level of knowing what I already know? The fact that Isaac has done videos, the fact that Steve has done videos showing the sloppiness and the outright, and I'm just going to say it, stupidity of applying this product when common sense is diametrically opposed to what you're doing, then why would I do a video like that? Because I already know the outcome. If I'm doing the same type of video that Steve did or same type of video that Isaac did, I'm going to come out with the same result. The problem is they've never done my videos. They've never tried my way. And that's what I'm suggesting. You're showing, well, this guy's showing here. Let me back it up a little bit. He's showing the flood test. Well, he doesn't show the complete flood test, but obviously he's pouring water in there, and I've done it on my videos too. And he's got a plug in there. So what I'm suggesting is to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I suggest that Steve or Isaac or anybody out there that doesn't like Redgard because they don't trust it at a mill thickness that's not to code or to whatever ANSI standards are or whatever Redgard tells you, do it my way. Put on 2 coats on your walls, 2 to 3 coats on your shower floor, and do a flood test. I guarantee the product will perform the way it does with me. It will perform the exact same way. You'll have no problem whatsoever. Do it my way. Why would I do it your way when you've already showed? Anyway, that's enough. That's enough. I'm going to bring up another video, this other homeowner I told you about that actually does it by the book and doesn't screw it up, which is a really thin tightrope to walk, because he's suggesting a mill thickness that Redgard and ANSI and all that stuff, as I said before, suggests that you do. And so he's doing that based on this gauge. But then he also doesn't have the cracking and the bubbles and the blisters and all that stuff that these other guys have had. So You know, you be the judge. You are the trier of fact, not me. I present evidence on my channel. My channel is evidence-based. I'm telling you, it's evidence-based. So I present the evidence, both of my way and other people's way, and then I let you decide. You're the jury and the judge. But don't get caught up in instructions, and don't be a book soldier. Please don't be a book soldier, because a lot of things can go wrong by doing things right. Is that a contradiction of terms? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. I think this is basically it.
And if you're interested on how to do that, you can check our link on the screen below. After you've completed your flood test, let the shower dry out, and then it is ready for tiling. I was pleasantly surprised by my experience with Redgard. I know there are some more premium options out there, and some purists like to use the more solid membranes instead of liquid applied, but I think it was very easy to apply. The instructions were straightforward. There's not a lot of odors. Even the cleanup was relatively easy, and it passed my flood test with flying colors. So I have no reservations about using Redgard or recommending it to anybody else. If you guys have used Redgard, or if you have any other experiences with other waterproofing membranes, I'd be happy to hear about it. Please put that in the comment section below.
Okay, so yeah, that's it. So that's it on the video. I don't really have much more to say than what I've already said, because I've already said enough. 30 minutes is long enough to, you know, chit chat about this stuff. I feel like the defender of Redgard. I'm not the defender of Redgard. You know, as I said on previous videos, if it had been Aqua Defense or Hydroban or 8+9 or Ardex or any of those products that somebody jumped on and said, oh, this is a crappy product because, you know, I applied it wrong and now look at the failure, I would be the same way. I would have the same mindset because I've used a product and haven't had that same failure. So I would still come to their defense. And I don't really care what you use. It doesn't have to be Redgard. I used Redgard because it was the first waterproofer in my hands. Had Home Depot at that time sold Ardex, and still did, I would be using Ardex without a failure. It doesn't really matter what waterproofer you use. What matters is the application. Can I reiterate that again? I have a green screen and I've got a green water cup. So my camera sees through the cup. Can I reiterate the application matters more than the product on anything in life? Anyway, I'm out. Look for next week's video about this guy that does it right and wrong at the same time. And I've got a lot to say about that too. And I think he does the same thing this guy did. He doesn't cover his fasteners with anything, which drives me crazy. It really does. I don't know why you would do that. Because, just a quick thought. On drywall, remember I talked about tape, using tape so that you don't have the cracking between the seams of drywall? And with drywall, you also cover your fasteners. So with any of this backer board, why would you not do the same thing? That's why it drives me crazy. Like they're talking about tape as if it's drywall, like the tape is going to do any good, but then they don't cover the fasteners. It drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm out. Enough said. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.